Hi guys, this is Yuri. In this video, I would like to present to you a very important practical skill and a very important thing for any aspiring chess player to try and develop. The ability to defend in bad positions and the skills that allows you to set traps and resist even versus the most seasoned opponents. Because sometimes it will happen that, no matter how good of a player you are, you will be getting in trouble, you will be getting bad and even lost positions. And in fact, I strongly believe that the true strength of a good player, of a grandmaster, is not, playing flawlessly and then converting brilliantly, but actually not giving up when the position is very, very difficult. That is exactly the biggest difference between decent players and very strong players. So I would like to show to you one of my games, or fragment of one of my games, played over a bit over 2 years ago in a Hungarian town Zalakaros in 2018 versus a Hungarian grandmaster Horvat Adam. I would confess I played absolutely terribly in this game. I got outplayed, I had very few chances, I was doing really badly, and here we got this position. Well, really, there's not much you can do if the position's objectively lost, If it's lost, if your opponent plays perfectly, he would win. It's mathematically winning, right? But you've got to create some practical chances. So let me try to show to you how I did that and how he could have instead won. So in this position, I will just make one move first. I played knight c7, and here my opponent could have, for example, just snatched this pawn, and he is, of course, 2 pawns up, and my bishop on g6 is a very bad piece. It's not going anywhere, ever. So literally I'm 2 pawns down and with a very inactive bishop. Of course I'm lost. He went knight f5 though, which is okay. And here was the moment when I've tried to set this trap. Now it looks like knight e7 is a huge threat. And with a fork, right? On a king and on a rook. At the same time, there's a problem. White's threatening to go knight d6 and he hits this rook. And if the rook moves, white's gonna win with this a7 knight. How can we stop both? Well, we can't really. I mean, you can, for example, take on f5 and after gf5 do something, but now white's about to collect this pawn. Now white has this wonderful pawn, kind of mass, in the center, and you're gonna lose. You might not lose in one move, but in 10 or 20, but you would lose. So I found a very cool idea, which is to go king f8. And at this point, my opponent could have just made some normal move, like say knight d4, and he would have been totally winning. But he went knight d6. And now it looks like white is just winning. White hitting this rook, and white hitting this knight. I cannot move both of them at the same time. So it looks like I just should resign. And mathematically, white still has a winning position. However, I've set a very, very nice trap. And I've had a very nice idea in mind, which might not even work, kind of move after move, but at least I have something in mind. How would you continue at this point as black? Please pause the video and try to find practical chances. So what I did here was knight takes on d5. Now, white could have taken, and actually mathematically he is still winning. But after rook c5, it looks like there is a very clear problem. The pawn is hanging. And if, say, for example, rook c8, then just king e7. And I'm still gonna pick this pawn, right? And what's white gonna do? The computer finds a very cunning idea, which is to continue with some knight c8, and then with some knight b6, and then after king c7 with d6, and then give up a knight and queen this pawn, and white is winning. And of course, once you see it, it looks like, it's kind of obvious. However, it's not such an easy thing to see in a practical game, even for a grandmaster, especially when it looks like you're just picking the rook and that's it. So white took this rook, and then I took the pawn on c3. And after knight d6, knight e4, I think it's already becoming kind of clear what my practical hopes are. As we know, the advantage of having a rook versus a minor piece is the fact that the rook's very mobile. It can easily switch between the flanks, files, ranks. It can go to a1 and then h1 in no time, and instead the black knight or the black bishop clearly cannot do as much. And that's why when you're defending an exchange down, it's a very good idea to try to get material, trade it off, and try to get everything to stay on one flank, like here. Because, for example, if white took this pawn on c4, my big hope was to trade more pawns with, say, h5, and for example, after king g2, I would just say develop my knight, redeploy my knight to e6. And at this point, it's really a very serious question whether white can actually win this or not. Maybe white can still maneuver, maybe white will eventually somehow find some way around, but really it feels to me like the only weakness on f7 is protected by the bishop and by the king, and white can attack it twice. White could theoretically somehow try to eventually run around with his king and come like to e8 or something, but in reality this is not happening. Once the king is somewhere on b4, most likely white is just gonna lose one of the pawns, right? Like pawn on e5 or a pawn on g4. So this position, I don't see a clear mathematical win, and it is possible that if I study deeper I would find it, even though I doubt it, but basically what matters is that within the practical terms, we've made white task very, very difficult. My opponent continued with the move rook c7, and now he played c3. And at this point, he could have won my pawn with by taking on e4 and then taking on c3. However, again, after say king e7, this is going to be a draw. Black is either going to pick the pawn on e5, let's say if check, we just inevitably pick the pawn on e5, or white can maybe try to hold on to the pawn with like rook e3 or something, but again, the problem is after say bishop d5 or bishop g6, there is just no way to break through. On one flank, especially with a broken pawn structure like this, white lacks the possibility to advance or do something, and black can simply later play, for example, pawn to g5, controlling squares on f4 and h4, and just maneuver his king all the way to g7, and there's nothing he would need to worry about. So that's not really a problem. And this position would be a draw. And even if white could win, again, the task of winning would be so difficult. So my opponent went king g2, and he's still okay. The computer still thinks, white can win. But after taking king e8, I had a very cunning idea in mind. So first of all, if white continues with rook c3, after king d7 he's losing his pawn inevitably, and again we have a position on the same flank, 3 versus 2, where black makes a draw. He might have a slight problem because now his king is cut off, but he has an extra pawn and he would hold this. But my opponent was still winning. But the thing is, he was just so confident he would win, because obviously, as you can see, the pawn is on d6. The black king is cut off the 7th rank. The pawn seems so strong. It just appears as though white will simply come over with his king and mate me, or queen, or whatever. So my opponent was totally relaxed. And at this point, without any hesitations at all, he continued g5. And what happened is that after c2, it transpired that either the white king or the white rook have to watch out this pawn. White cannot bring the king, for example, to c6, because then I'll queen. White's king can stop it, but then I'm just gonna wait with mine, or white's rook can stop it, but then I'm also gonna wait with my king. So it turned out there's already no win. And after some absolutely irrelevant already at this point moves, white tried to do something with his king. And it's very important that I could easily let the pawn on f7 hang, because then the c pawn would queen. We just waited. White tried something, but there is really nothing I have to do. I just need to guard this pawn and not let the d pawn queen, which is not too difficult a task. And after some moves, we just agreed to a draw. And really, in this position, it was still possible for white to win. And actually, it's quite ironical that my opponent didn't, because it was move number 41. And as you know, in the professional tournaments, you typically get additional time, like half an hour after 40 moves. So it's exactly now that he suddenly got the time to think after being in time trouble, but he rushed through and didn't. You can, if you want, use this position as a challenge. How can we win as white? And now I'm gonna show you. Hopefully you've paused the video. So white can take on h5, and the problem is the bishop's getting distracted, and after taking, white can go king f4 and then just take on c3, and white is on time to defend this pawn, and unfortunately the rook will be on the 7th rank and we would lose. So basically the main lesson in this fragment is not that, you know, I found some brilliant drawing combination. The main lesson in this fragment is that if you resist, if you pose practical problems, if you don't want to resign, if you don't like losing, which obviously most of us don't, and if you believe that you might find ideas and, you know, make opponents' task difficult, and if you keep resisting, if you keep looking, if you keep trying, it's very likely that the opponent will crack and would not be able to convert even the decisive advantage. I've played a Grandmaster here, a very strong, experienced Grandmaster, yet he could not convert a totally winning position. And that happens to all of us, that happened to me many times too, but what I want you to learn is that very often you'll have chances even in such lost positions. Hopefully the video will be useful. I hope you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe. Do comment, do ask questions, and I look forward to hearing from you.